Today, we'll see how to bind a Silverlight combo box to DevForce entities. Hi, I'm Ward Bell, your host for this video. In a moment, we're going to see this little demo live. This is just a snapshot, bunch of buttons, some very simple text boxes, a log area at the bottom to see what's going on. But the real focus is the combo box for setting the manager of the current employee, here seen as Nancy. Her current manager is Andrew. And so that's the selected item in the combo box, and if we were to drop it down, we would see Andrew, of course, plus all the other possibilities for Nancy's manager. We will learn how to bind that selected item in the combo box to the manager property of the employee. We will learn how to populate the combo box by binding its item source to a completely different collection of reference entities. And then, as a kind of a bonus, we're going to learn how we can actually change the list it's in the drop-down as we move with the back and next buttons from one employee to the next. This is the finished product of our simple combo demo. We have a log area at the bottom with things that have happened so far. We've retrieved the potential managers, which are the basis for what we're going to see in a combo box in a second. We've retrieved all the employees that we're going to be looking at and possibly editing. And we're reporting what the current employee is as we move to it, which is Nancy. She hasn't been changed yet. And her manager is Andrew Fuller, all of which you can tell just by looking at our very simple display, which has a read-only ID, the first name and last name, the entity state telling us whether the entity has been changed or not, and the star of our show, the combo box, which, when I drop down the list, we see a list of candidate managers for Nancy. That is a subset of the potential managers that any employee might have. The difference being that Nancy is not listed here as a possibility because one of the rules is that you cannot be your own manager. If I go forward, again, the log shows that we're now on Andrew, so we've got a running tally of what's happening. I'll go forward again, and we see Janet, and she's got Andrew. Were I to come down here and say change her manager to Laura, it would show immediately modified. We haven't logged this state yet, so if I move on and then move back, we see that the log also confirms that we believe it was modified. At one time she wasn't. Given that this is modified, if I were to click Save, as I'm now about to do, we were saving employees, and you can see that she is now unchanged. She's actually in the database with Laura. Janet has Laura as her manager, and if we restart the application by refreshing the browser and scroll ahead, whoops, there's Janet. We see that she did indeed. The database said that she had Laura, and she does. And just because I want to return things to their original state, I will change her to Andrew, and we're back in business again. So that's how the application works. Now let's go look at the code. The solution is simple, as our demos usually are. There's a web project and a Silverlight project. In the web project, we have our model. Right there, that's our generated model. It actually has only a single type in it and a partial class, which we'll look into to extend the employee. Up in the project, of course, we've got links to those files. That's how we get the entities accessible from Silverlight. All of the UI action is in main page XAML and main page view model, which supports the main page. And there's this mysterious thing called the view model locator, which we will discover the purpose of that very shortly. Let's take a look at the XAML. Most of the things I want to show you are easier to see in the XAML. We have a layout grid of 3 rows. The top row is our button row, where we had our back button, our next button, and our save button. Then we had the employee data, which I'm going to open up in a minute. And then in the third row, which is fixed at a height of 400, we have the message area where we had all of the logging. Let's take a look into the employee data that we're putting on screen. The This will be bound to, they're all bound to the view model, but the employee data grid is bound to the current employee property of the view model, which means that within the context of this grid, the source for all binding will be an employee, whatever the current employee is in the view model. The view model has, 5 rows and 2 columns. These are the labels on the left-hand side: ID first, last, manager, entity state. And then down below, we have the values, which consist of mostly text boxes that are simply bound to properties of the employee, the current employee. So binding to employee ID, first name, last name. This one's a little trickier. We're just in order to get to it, we have to go from employee to entity aspect to get its entity state, so we can report whether the object has been changed or not. But the star of our show is the combo box. The selected item, well, that is to say, which is the item that's in the combo box that's selected, that's in the drop-down, is binding to the manager property of the current employee. It's going to tell us who is the current employee. The part that's really going to interest us is the item source of the combo box. The item source provides the elements that appear in the drop-down list. And what we want there is a list of employees who could be the manager of the current employee. And there's no way we're going to find a property on employee itself that could tell us who the potential managers are. At least that's not something that's part of the domain logic of employee in our scheme. Therefore, we're going to have to get that pick list from something else, from some other property, and a property that's not on employee. At this time, it happens to be the potential manager's property, but it's a property of a view model. Well, how do I get to the view model when my current context is the employee? This is a standard problem in Silverlight because we don't have the ability to use the kind of WPF binding that lets us walk the visual tree to get back above the data context that is our employee to reach the view model that provided the current employee. So we need a trick, and the trick is the view model locator. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to create a view model locator, which is a static resource of this user control, of this view. And then when we find that static resource, it will have a VM property, a view model property. That gives us our view model, and now, ta-da, we're able to reach the properties of the view model itself. Essentially what it does is it allows us to hop over this data context to get at the view model of the outermost level, the user control. And so here is the resource. It is, and the resource is a view model locator whose key is view model locator. That's how we bound to it before. That's the real trick. Now, in order to see that, we'll go to the code. We'll see how it all works. Here's the code behind. This isn't beautiful code. This is just here to illustrate the point. When the page is constructed, we listen to the page loaded event. The page loaded event comes to here, where what we do is we find that resource that was instantiated in the XAML. We cast it to view model locator, because when you look for resources, you get the type object back. So we get our locator, and now what we're able to do is we're able to create a new instance of our view model. We stick it in the view model property because we're going to use that again and again in the code behind. Then we also stick it in the VM property of our locator. Remember, by sticking it there, we were now in a position in our XAML to retrieve it from the VM, retrieve any property, and retrieve any property of it. So we'll stick it in the locator, and then we'll also set the data context for this view to the same view model. Later on, each of our button clicks is, we get the handler, and we're just going to call the corresponding methods on the view model to implement whatever those button clicks mean. It's on to the view model now. I neglected to show you the view model locator just in case you thought this was really enormously complicated. It isn't. It has a single property. VM, as we've seen, a getter and a setter, and the setter raises property changed. It implements iNotify property changed. And this is just so that when we eventually do set the view model, as we just showed that we do in the constructor, it will raise property change so that the view knows to refresh whatever it has to do. Remember, when our main page view starts up, its page is loaded. One of the things we do in that handler is we instantiate a new view model. So if we go look at that, we see that in the constructor, what we do is we initialize the messages string. Messages is what is bound to the log area at the bottom. Then we crank up a new entity manager for ourselves, and we hold on to that because we'll use it repeatedly. And then our next thing is that we go get potential managers. Now you may be saying, why don't I go get the employees that I'm going to show? And the reason is that in general, the first thing you need to do is go get your reference entities, get those set up, get all your lists set up that you're going to put in drop-down boxes and combo boxes and do whatever you're going to do. Now actually you wouldn't do that in this view model. In the real world you would have created some service to do all of that, but we're trying to keep it simple here. So the principle is, as we're going to see it here, go get the reference stuff. Once you get the reference stuff, then go get the variable data that you're actually going to be changing. So if we go see how this is actually implemented, it's not terribly surprising. We're going to use our entity manager, we're going to do a query, and we're going to execute that query. And then we're going to have a callback. Note that in our example, every employee has the potential to be a manager, but obviously we could have restricted it and said that only people who begin with the letter A are managers, but are potential managers for other employees. But we didn't do that. We said everybody could be a manager. And if we look at the callback, assuming all goes well, what we do is we get the results. Notice that I did not sort them. I suppose I could have sorted them on the server, but there's no particular reason to do that here. I didn't do that in this example. So I got the results back, but I do want to order the drop-down box. I'm using link to objects to order them by first name. And then I take that to list, and that becomes my list of potential managers. Well, almost the full list. I want to be able to clear their manager. I want to be able to say you have no manager. The only way I can think of to do that is to put some kind of a placeholder element, a sentinel, to represent the no manager case. What do I have ready to hand to do that? Every DevForce entity type has a null entity instance that can be gotten from the entity manager. So here we get the null employee entity, and I'm designating that as the representative of the no manager case, and I insert that right at the top of the list. And by the way, when I do that, you may have noticed that I, at various places, print out the name of the person who should appear in the drop-down box or in the log. How did I do that? I did that actually in the partial class that extends employee. I added a full name property, and by the way, I said if you are the null entity, the full name that we should put out is none, which is why you'll see the word none in the drop-down box. Otherwise, we solder together first name and last name. I also decided to override the objects to string property to return the full name. This is just making things a little faster for our demonstration. So we have a list of managers that consists of all the potentials sorted by first name with the special reserved null entities stuck in at the top. Now that we have that list, we can set our potential managers property, which raises implements iNotify property change, therefore raises the potential managers changed message to the view, which will realize it has to refresh if it needs to refresh. And oh, by the way, you may remember that I had the got potential managers message in the log. Now that we have all of our reference entities, which in fact consist of only the list that's going to go into the drop-down box, we're ready to go get employees. So we've chained from getting our reference information to getting the data that we want to see. Let's go take a peek at that. Here we are in Get Employees. Oh, surprise, we're going to get all of the employees. This will in fact return immediately because it's already done a query for all employees, but we structure it as if there might have been a difference. Here's the callback. Assuming all goes well, we do as we often do. We take each result and we add it to our employees collection. And then we tell the log about it. And then, having done that, we set the current employee to the first employee that we retrieved. Let's go see what is in the current employee. The current employee, because it changes from the view model, we have to raise current employee property changed when the time is ripe, and we're going to write to the log when the time is ripe. And if we really haven't done anything, we just bail out. Otherwise, we set the value. You can see I'm kind of moving in on this method right here, because everything else about this looks ever so much like a normal INPC view model property for a current employee. And this guy is actually unnecessary if we are comfortable, as we at this very second are, in showing all potential managers in the dropdown. Because that list is static, there's no reason to change anything. So what the line I was showing you is irrelevant. But let's suppose that we don't want to show potential managers, we want to show the candidate managers. That is to say, every time we move from one employee to the next, we want to change the list that's in the dropdown. Because we have this rule that says you can't be your own manager. Yes, we should put validation logic into the employee that enforces that. But why give the user an opportunity to pick something from a list that we know is going to be invalid? So instead of showing all the managers that could ever be a manager to somebody, why don't we, every time we move to a new current employee, show in the drop-down box just those potential managers who are candidates for this employee? And so we've just moved from potential managers to the candidate managers property in the view model. Well, if we're going to do that, if the list is going to change every time we change the current employee, then it follows that we're going to have to call something, and this method is that something that will change the list that the combo box binds to. So let's go see how that's done. Well, here it is, but there's a little trickiness in it. So I'm going to jump ahead to the method that just populates the list for a given employee, which is right here. We're going to filter, Bob being the guy who hired us to do this job. Bob told us that you can't manage yourself, so we got to remove, we have to filter out whoever the current employee is. And we have another rule that says, well, yeah, you can't manage yourself unless the database already tells us that you're managing yourself. Anyway, once we have that, we are now ready to set the candidate managers property. The moment we do that, we're raising property change for candidate managers, and we would expect the combo box in the view to update. What was tricky? Well, let me go back to the caller of that. This is the set candidate for current employee that we're calling inside of our current employee property. There's a slight problem. It's only a problem if you're going to swap combo box lists as you move from current employee to current employee. But if you do that, then the binding sequence gets a little confusing. What happens is this. Let's suppose I'm going from Nancy to Andrew. In the act of swapping the list that's in the combo box, the binding says, oh, you're changing the selected item. Well, in the moment of swapping, what happens is the selected item goes to null. And that would mean that as we were swapping the list, we would accidentally be changing Nancy's manager to null. So we have to somehow stop the binding while we're swapping the lists in the combo box. One way to do that I found that works is to take whatever the current employee is now, we remember it, and then temporarily set the current employee backing field to none and raise current employee. Well, when we do that, the binding is going to turn around, come back, and say, hey, tell me who the current employee is. Well, the current employee is going to return the underscore backing field current employee. It'll return null. And now, for this brief moment in time, the view is binding to nothing. As long as it's binding to nothing, we are now free to change the list in the combo box and tell the view to update the list in the combo box. We're not going to have to worry about the binding magic trying to change any real employee, because there is no real employee to be binding to at this time. Whew, we're safe. Once we have updated the combo box list, now we have to hustle back and restore the current employee that we temporarily moved out of the way. That's why when we return back up into here, all right, now we're back in business. We raise property changed again on current employees, so now it's ready to look at Andrew. All right, in our earlier scenario, if I walked through, we went from Nancy to Andrew to null, back to Andrew again. Then we write our message, and we are good to go. So you've learned how to bind to the selected item, how to populate the combo box, how to use a view model locator to hop over the intermediate data context to get the view model so that you can get at the property that supplies the list for the combo box. You've learned to deal with changing the list elements on the fly. That's our story. Come back to ideablade.com to see more DevForce training videos.